Tom had always trusted his wife completely, but when her fitness tracker started showing unusual movement patterns and secret locations, he thought she was having an affair. The truth would shock him. Megan's tracker showed her at a restricted waste facility yesterday. She had told him she'd been at the library. Tom stared at his phone screen, the Health Watch alert still blinking. Anomaly detected. Review household data. The movement data was impossible to misinterpret. Yesterday at 2:15 p.m., Megan had left their apartment and walked toward Central Library as planned. But instead of going inside, her tracker showed her traveling 3 miles east to the industrial district, a restricted zone requiring special permits, 47 minutes at an abandoned facility, then home via a route through 2 more monitored areas. Meanwhile, Megan had come home with printouts of census documents and a cheerful story about genealogy research. She'd even mentioned specific immigration records she'd supposedly found. Complete lies. Her tracker proved she'd never been to the library at all. Tom closed the bathroom door and called up more data. The anomaly detection system had been flagging Megan's movements for 2 weeks. Unexplained detours, visits to locations that didn't match her stated plans. Periods where her tracker showed her standing motionless for extended times in areas with no obvious explanation for stopping. The app offered a simple solution. Report anomalous behavior to Civic Health Authority for family wellness evaluation. Tom's finger hovered over the report button. Megan had been acting strangely lately. More secretive phone calls, coming home later than expected. Last week, he'd found unfamiliar clothes in her laundry, a dark jacket he'd never seen her wear, with pockets that smelled like industrial chemicals. He'd assumed she was having an affair. The thought had been eating at him for weeks, but he'd been too afraid to confront her directly. Now the tracker data seemed to confirm his worst fears. The industrial district had several hotels that rented rooms by the hour. The unexplained stops could be meetings with someone she was trying to hide. Tom looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. 5 years of marriage, and he still loved Megan completely. But the data didn't lie. The mandatory Health Watch trackers were designed to monitor citizen wellness and movement for public safety. They weren't supposed to be tools for spying on spouses, but the information was undeniably useful. Before he could lose his nerve, Tom pressed the report button. Household member anomaly reported. Civic Health Authority will respond within 24 hours. Thank you for maintaining community wellness standards. The shower was running in their bedroom. Megan always took long showers before work, humming songs he couldn't identify. Tom slipped his phone into his pocket and tried to act normal as he got dressed. "Morning, honey," Megan called from the bathroom. "Coffee's ready in the kitchen." "Thanks," Tom replied, his voice sounding strange even to himself. By the time Megan emerged from the bathroom, toweling her dark hair, Tom had convinced himself he'd done the right thing. If she was having an affair, the Civic Health Authority would investigate discreetly and recommend counseling. If there was another explanation for her movements, she'd have a chance to explain. "You okay?" Megan asked, studying his face as she pulled on her work clothes. "You look tense." "Just tired. Didn't sleep well." Megan worked as a data analyst for the city's environmental monitoring department. Her job involved tracking air quality, water purity, and waste management efficiency across different districts. It was steady work that provided good benefits and contributed to their household's civic contribution score. "I'll probably be late again tonight," Megan said, checking her Health Watch tracker to ensure it was properly synced. "We're analyzing contamination readings from the industrial district. Some of the sensors have been giving weird data." Tom's attention sharpened. "What kind of weird data?" Chemical signatures that don't match any of the registered facilities? Could be equipment malfunction? Or maybe someone's dumping stuff they shouldn't be dumping? Megan grabbed her work bag and kissed his forehead. Either way, it means overtime for me. After Megan left for work, Tom spent the morning trying to focus on his own job. He worked remotely as a software developer for a financial services company, writing code that tracked consumer spending patterns for the Department of Economic Stability. The work was routine, but paid well, and it allowed him to maintain their apartment in one of the city's better residential zones. But he couldn't stop thinking about Megan's tracker data. The industrial district was heavily monitored because it housed several facilities that processed waste from the outer residential zones. Citizens needed permits to enter because of potential exposure to hazardous materials. What possible reason could Megan have for going there? Around noon, Tom's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Morrison, this is Agent Patricia Valdez with the Civic Health Authority. We received your report about anomalous movement patterns. I'd like to discuss this matter with you in person." "How soon?" "I'm in your building's lobby now. May I come up?" Tom's heart started racing. He'd expected a phone interview, maybe a form to fill out online. A personal visit meant they were taking this seriously. Agent Valdez was a woman in her 40s, with short grey hair and the efficient manner of someone who dealt with domestic issues professionally. She wore a dark blue uniform with the CHA insignia and carried a tablet for recording statements. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for reporting your concerns. The Health Watch system is designed to identify potential wellness issues before they become serious problems." She settled into Tom's living room and activated her recording app. "Can you tell me what first made you notice your wife's unusual behavior?" Tom found himself describing the past few weeks in detail. Megan's unexplained absences, the strange clothes, her secretive phone calls, the way she'd been more tired lately, as if she was exerting herself physically in ways her desk job didn't require. "And you believe she may be engaging in an extramarital relationship?" "I don't want to believe it, but the tracker data shows her going places she never mentioned. The industrial district isn't exactly a romantic destination, but there are hotels there." Agent Valdez made notes on her tablet. "Mr. Morrison, I need to ask you some questions about your wife's work and social connections. Has she mentioned any new friends or colleagues recently?" "Not really. Megan's always been pretty private about work stuff." "Has she expressed any political opinions that seemed unusual? Criticism of city policies? Concerns about government programs?" Tom frowned. What does that have to do with tracking her movements? "The Civic Health Authority investigates all forms of wellness concerns, Mr. Morrison. Physical health, mental health, and civic health are all interconnected. We want to make sure your wife isn't involved in activities that could be harmful to herself or the community." The questions continued for 20 minutes. Agent Valdez wanted to know about Megan's internet usage, her shopping patterns, whether she'd been in contact with anyone who lived outside their residential zone. Some of the questions seemed irrelevant to adultery investigation, but Tom answered as completely as he could. "We'll begin discreet monitoring of your wife's activities," Agent Valdez said as she prepared to leave. "This is standard procedure for movement anomalies. In most cases, we find perfectly innocent explanations. What if you don't find an innocent explanation? Then we'll discuss appropriate interventions with you. Thank you for being a responsible household partner, Mr. Morrison. Citizens like you help maintain the stability that makes our communities safe." After Agent Valdez left, Tom tried to return to work, but concentration was impossible. He'd set something in motion that felt bigger than marital counseling. The questions about Meghan's political opinions and social connections suggested the Civic Health Authority was concerned about more than her fidelity. Tom decided to do some investigating of his own. He accessed Meghan's shared calendar, looking for patterns in her scheduled activities. Most of her appointments were routine: work meetings, medical checkups, grocery shopping, but several recent entries were vague: library research or environmental monitoring fieldwork, without specific locations or times. He pulled up the city's public records database and cross-referenced Meghan's tracker data with the addresses she'd visited. The industrial district location corresponded to a facility called Advanced Materials Processing that was registered as a waste treatment plant. But when Tom looked up the company's business license, he found it had been suspended 3 months ago for environmental violations. Meghan had been visiting an abandoned waste treatment facility repeatedly. Tom's phone rang. Meghan calling from work. "Hey, honey, I'm going to be even later tonight than I thought. The contamination data is worse than we realized. I might need to stay until 8 or 9. Where exactly are you working on this? Are you going back to the industrial district?" There was a pause. Why would you ask that? You mentioned contamination readings from there yesterday. I was just wondering if it's safe for you to be in that area. I'm working from the office, Tom. Analyzing data, not collecting samples. I'll be fine. But Tom knew she was lying. Her Health Watch tracker was already showing her outside the Environmental Department building, moving east toward the industrial district. By 7 p.m., Tom was pacing his apartment, checking Meghan's location every few minutes. Her tracker showed her at the same abandoned facility she'd visited before. But this time she wasn't alone. The CHA had given him access to expanded tracking data as part of their investigation, and he could see 4 other signals clustered at the same location. Tom grabbed his jacket and headed for his car. If Meghan was meeting someone at an abandoned facility, he wanted to see for himself what was happening. The industrial district at night was a maze of empty warehouses and defunct manufacturing plants. Streetlights were sparse, and most of the buildings showed signs of abandonment. Tom parked 3 blocks away from the advanced materials processing facility and walked carefully through the shadows. The building was larger than he'd expected, a sprawling complex of concrete structures surrounded by a chain-link fence. But sections of the fence had been cut, and Tom could see light coming from windows in the main building. As he got closer, he could hear voices, multiple people talking in low, urgent tones. Tom crept to a broken window and peered inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Meghan was there, but she wasn't meeting a lover. She was standing in front of a group of about 20 people, pointing to charts and diagrams displayed on portable screens. The people looked like ordinary citizens, men and women of various ages, some wearing work clothes, others in casual attire. "The contamination readings are getting worse," Meghan was saying. "The government's own data shows toxic levels in 3 residential zones, but they're suppressing the information. People have a right to know what they're being exposed to." An older man raised his hand. "How long before it reaches the central districts?" "Based on the current spread pattern, maybe 6 months. The chemical compounds are seeping into the groundwater faster than anyone anticipated." "What about relocation? Can we get people moved to safer areas?" Meghan shook her head. "Not through official channels. The Department of Environmental Safety is claiming the contamination is within acceptable limits. They're covering up the real data to avoid mass panic." Tom realized he was watching some kind of underground meeting. These people weren't conspirators planning violence or terrorism. They were citizens trying to understand environmental hazards that their own government was hiding from them. But then Meghan's next words changed everything. That's why we need to accelerate the evacuation network. Maria's group has successfully moved 12 families out of Zone 7. Robert's team has established safe houses in the outer districts, but we need more volunteers to help with transportation and temporary housing. Evacuation network. Safe houses. This wasn't just an information sharing meeting. These people were running an underground railroad to help citizens escape contaminated areas without government authorization. Megan Morrison has been crucial to this operation, a woman at the front of the group said. Her access to environmental department data has allowed us to identify contamination zones weeks before official announcements. Without her information, we couldn't have warned people in time. Tom felt the world shifting around him. His wife wasn't having an affair. She was part of a resistance network that was helping people escape environmental hazards the government was covering up. Her secret movements, her unexplained absences, the strange clothes that smelled like chemicals. It all made sense now. And he had reported her to the Civic Health Authority. Tom backed away from the window, his mind racing. Agent Valdez hadn't been investigating adultery. She'd been looking for evidence of exactly what Tom was witnessing, an organized effort to undermine government authority by providing unauthorized assistance to citizens. Megan was a hero, and he had just handed her over to the authorities. Tom pulled out his phone to call Megan, to warn her somehow. But before he could dial, bright lights flooded the area around the building. Vehicles were approaching from multiple directions, black SUVs and vans with government plates. The Civic Health Authority had followed Tom's information directly to Megan's location. Inside the building, someone shouted a warning. The meeting broke up instantly, people scattering toward different exits. Tom saw Megan grabbing papers and equipment, trying to secure evidence before fleeing. "This is the Civic Health Authority," a voice announced through speakers. "The building is surrounded. Exit with your hands visible, and you will not be harmed." Tom watched in horror as tactical teams moved to block the escape routes. These weren't social workers investigating a domestic issue. They were enforcement officers conducting a raid on what they clearly considered a subversive organization. Megan emerged from a side exit, carrying a bag of what looked like data storage devices. She made it about 50 yards before a spotlight pinned her against a fence. Officers in tactical gear surrounded her immediately. "Megan Morrison, you are under arrest for violations of the Civic Health Protection Act, unauthorized dissemination of classified environmental data, and conspiracy to undermine public safety measures." Tom started to run toward her, but stopped when he realized how that would look. If the authorities saw him here, they'd assume he was part of the group he'd reported. His presence would only make things worse for Megan. Instead, he retreated to his car and drove home in a state of shock. Megan had been using her legitimate job to uncover government cover-ups of environmental hazards. The contamination readings she'd mentioned weren't work projects. They were evidence that toxic chemicals were poisoning residential areas while officials pretended everything was safe. The resistance network she was part of wasn't trying to overthrow the government. They were trying to save people's lives when the government wouldn't. And Tom had destroyed it all because he thought his wife was cheating on him. Back at his apartment, Tom sat in the dark, waiting for a phone call that might never come. Megan's Health Watch tracker had gone dark after her arrest, which probably meant they'd removed it, along with her other personal property. Around midnight, his phone finally rang. Agent Valdez. "Mr. Morrison, your wife is in custody. As we suspected, she was involved in activities that pose serious risks to community stability. When can I see her?" "That depends on several factors. Megan's cooperation with our investigation, her willingness to provide information about her associates, her commitment to rehabilitation programs." "Rehabilitation programs?" Your wife has been exposed to radical ideologies that have distorted her judgment. The good news is that these conditions are treatable with proper intervention. Tom felt sick. How long will she be held? Indefinite detention is authorized for Civic Health Protection Act violations, but with good behavior and full cooperation, she could be eligible for supervised release in 6 to 18 months. After Agent Valdez hung up, Tom sat in his empty apartment trying to process what had happened. Megan was being held indefinitely for trying to help people escape environmental contamination. The government was treating her like a terrorist for providing information that could save lives. Tom spent the next 3 days trying to find out where Megan was being held and how he could help her. But every official he contacted gave him the same response. Megan was receiving appropriate treatment for her condition, and he would be notified when visitation was permitted. On the 4th day, Tom's doorbell rang. He opened it to find a young woman with short black hair and intense eyes. She wore ordinary street clothes, but something about her manner reminded him of the people he'd seen at the abandoned facility. "Mr. Morrison, my name is Maria Santos. I think we need to talk." Tom hesitated. "About what?" "About your wife, about what really happened at that facility, and about why you might want to help us fix what your report destroyed." Maria stepped into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "Megan saved my daughter's life. Zone 7, where we lived, was contaminated with industrial solvents that caused neurological damage in children. The government knew about it for months, but didn't warn anyone because they didn't want to pay for relocation." She showed Tom a photo on her phone, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, smiling at the camera. "Emma started having seizures 6 months ago. The doctors claimed it was a genetic condition, but Megan's daughter showed that 12 other children in our building were developing the same symptoms. Megan helped us move to a clean area before Emma's brain was permanently damaged." Tom stared at the photo. "How many families has Megan helped?" 47 so far. People with children, elderly residents, anyone who couldn't afford to relocate on their own when they found out their homes were poisoning them." Maria sat down on Tom's couch. "The thing is, Mr. Morrison, the network isn't destroyed. Megan was just one source of information. We have others inside the Environmental Department, the Health Ministry, even the Civic Health Authority itself." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we know you reported Megan thinking she was having an affair. We know you didn't intend to expose a resistance operation." Maria's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "You made a mistake based on incomplete information. Now you have a chance to make it right." "How?" "Megan's arrest created a problem for us. The authorities are reviewing all the cases she was involved in, trying to identify the families she helped relocate. Some of those families are going to be forced back to contaminated areas. Children are going to get sick." Tom felt the weight of responsibility settling on him. "What do you want me to do?" "We need someone with access to official databases, someone who can monitor government communications about Megan's case, someone the authorities trust because he's already cooperated with them." "You want me to spy on the Civic Health Authority?" "We want you to help save the people your wife was protecting." Maria pulled out a small device that looked like a standard data storage unit. "This contains Megan's backup files, environmental data, contamination maps, contact information for at-risk families. If you help us, we can continue her work while she's detained." Tom looked at the device. Taking it would make him part of the same network he'd inadvertently exposed. But refusing to take it would mean abandoning the people Megan had been trying to help. "If I do this, what happens when they catch me?" "We don't get caught," Maria said simply. "We're careful, we plan thoroughly, and we only take necessary risks. Megan was captured because you reported her movements to people who were already suspicious about environmental data leaks. She's my wife. I thought she was. You thought she was lying to you, and she was. But she was lying to protect you and to protect the people she was helping. Maria stood up. The question is whether you're willing to take the same risks she was taking. Tom thought about Megan, sitting in some government detention facility, being subjected to rehabilitation for the crime of warning people about toxic contamination. He thought about the families she'd helped and the children who might be forced back into dangerous environments if her work stopped. What do you need me to do? Maria smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. First, we need you to maintain your cover as a concerned husband who reported suspicious behavior. Continue cooperating with Agent Valdez. Attend any counseling sessions they recommend. Act like you're grateful for their help. And then? Then we start planning how to get Megan out of detention and expose the contamination cover-up that's poisoning half the city. As Maria left his apartment, Tom realized his life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. 4 days ago, he'd been a software developer with a stable marriage and a quiet life. Now, he was about to become part of an underground resistance network fighting government cover-ups of environmental disasters. He looked at the data storage device Maria had left behind. Such a small thing to contain so much dangerous information. But Megan had risked everything to protect that data and the people it could help. Tom plugged the device into his computer and began reading the files. What he found was even worse than Maria had described. Not just contamination in a few residential zones, but a systematic pattern of environmental disasters being covered up across the entire metropolitan area. Chemical spills affecting water supplies. Illegal dumping creating toxic soil conditions. Industrial accidents that had never been reported to the public. Megan had documented dozens of cases where government agencies had knowledge of serious health risks, but had chosen to suppress the information rather than deal with the political and economic consequences of mass relocations. Tom's phone buzzed with a text message. Mr. Morrison, this is Agent Valdez. Please report to our offices tomorrow at 10 a.m. for a follow-up interview regarding your wife's case. He stared at the message, then looked back at his computer screen filled with evidence of government cover-ups. Tomorrow, he would sit across from Agent Valdez and pretend to be grateful for her investigation into his wife's anomalous behavior. But tonight, he would start learning how to help the people Megan had been protecting. Tom opened a new document and began typing a message to the secure contact address Maria had given him. This is Tom Morrison. I'm ready to help. What's the first step? The response came back within minutes. Welcome to the network. Your first assignment is to monitor all communications regarding your wife's detention. We need to know what they're planning for the families she helped relocate. As Tom settled in for a long night of reading classified environmental data and planning his first acts of resistance against the government he'd served faithfully for years, he realized that Megan's HealthWatch tracker had been right about one thing. Her movement patterns had been unusual. Because she'd been moving through a world where helping people survive was considered a crime, and telling the truth was treated as terrorism. Now it was Tom's turn to develop some unusual movement patterns of his own.
The story ends, but the system continues. This channel survives because of you. Like, subscribe, and share. The next transmission awaits on screen.